never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.
Hi guys, welcome back to My Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stephan Neff. Today is another fantastic day, and today is actually Survival Tuesday. Survival Tuesday is when I bring guests on who have got a highly specific skill that addresses a unique problem. And face it, life is so full of problems, and sometimes we are like the blind, led by the blind, stumbling into these problems, whilst my guest has actually figured out, hang on, certain things are really predictable in life, like taxes. No, she's not a tax accountant. You guys can stop, don't switch off. She's a woman who has decided to look at fertility in the same way as you would look at the marriage, to having a beautiful wedding. How much planning is going into your wedding? How much fun time there is choosing the flowers, choosing the guests, choosing the groom. Oh, sorry. No, sorry, that should be there, actually. That is still, still lots of choices. When it then comes to babies, yeah, well, people don't do so much planning, and maybe we should. And for that reason, I brought in Alexandria DeVito. Alexandria, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
And I actually, when I saw the information about you, I thought, this woman has something. Because bottom line is, we are often enough so unprepared for life. That's my bugbear. That's my book, My Steps to Sobriety. And in there, I, of course, describe sobriety, but about that much of the book is all about action plans, standing operating procedures for life. Okay, that's when life gives you predictable challenges, yet we stumble into them as if, my goodness, how could that have happened? Okay. And could that be a toxic relationship? Could that be maybe a person who is not so nice at work, etc.? Or could that maybe be a pregnancy? Oh, whoops, I've thrown away the birth control pill. No, what's happening? It's weird. But what made you come up with this kind of more systematic approach?
I love that question. And I love how you talked about this idea of standard operating procedures, because I think there, is this element of getting pregnant that is mystical and magical. And that's kind of part of what we've been taught. But there is also a very methodical side of it. And that's kind of what we're focused on. So I came to this, through a whole, series of journeys, as we all do, right? I spent my early career doing healthcare consulting, so kind of worked on that side of the business. And then I went back to school. I got my MBA from Harvard, and then I also did a master's in nutrition. And after I got my two master's degrees, I actually started working as a clinical nutritionist. And then I did further training in functional medicine, and started working with a bunch of different clients, and had a bunch of clients and a bunch of friends come to me asking about advice, support, and guidance about getting pregnant. And at first I thought, this seems like a fairly solvable problem. And so I had one friend who came to me and said, I think of myself as fairly resourceful. I'm willing to do anything. I'm willing to pay anything, but nobody can tell me how to solve this problem. And I thought, that seems off to me. That doesn't seem like, that seems like something that a lot of people would be interested in. This seems like a solvable problem. And so I kind of, thought I would be a helpful friend. And I started digging. I read everything I could get my hands on. I read the clinical studies. I dove really deep. And first I realized she was right, that there really weren't great resources out there when it comes to getting pregnant. A lot of it, right? Most of the time, people had sex ed. It was, when they were 12 or 13 years old, maybe. And
then if you're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. If at all. And the messaging that is appropriate or kind of fit for purpose to potentially prevent teen pregnancies, which is, I think, a lot of what early sex ed is not appropriate or not fit for purpose when you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s and planning for pregnancy. And so there's been no update to that information. We don't have great resources to tell us, okay, that model may have been appropriate for then, but what's appropriate for now? and how do we actually actively plan, and how do you optimize the probability of getting pregnant, having a healthy pregnancy, and having a healthy baby. Not just kind of roll in and roll the dice, as you said, and see what happens, right? Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. But how do we increase the probability of that happening? And so, because I had spent so many years in the business world, I was used to diagnostics, and I was used to procedures, standard operating procedures. And I was wondering, why are we not applying a lot of these same principles to our health? And certainly when we think about our health, when it comes to getting pregnant, which is potentially one of the most important things that people will do in their lives. And so can we put more intentionality, and more importantly, can we put more structure and support around that entire process? So that's kind of what has brought me to this space, and to building Poplin, and creating those resources and that guidance for couples that are planning to conceive.
Hmm. But then let me play devil's advocate. Is it not
Please.
a beautiful, beautiful, magical, mystical thing that a boy and a girl get together, make love, and then a baby comes? Why do we need standard operating procedures for that to happen?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of components to this. So certainly, if we're talking about the context of a heterosexual relationship, there is that's in a lot of history, that has been the process that's been followed. Is we're just gonna try it and see how it goes. And for much of history, that worked, and it worked really well. But I think the issue is that in the last half decade or so, our environment has changed more than in the last 10,000 years. The way we eat, the way we move, the way we socialize, the amount of chemicals that are in and around us on a regular basis. And what's happened is that our bodies were designed to conceive, but our modern environment was not. And so there is a mismatch between our genes and our environment. And our genes have not kept pace with all of the changes to our environment. And because of that, we see a massive increase in fertility challenges. The latest statistics say about 20% of couples have trouble conceiving. And I believe those numbers are grossly understated, because a lot of people don't get help for this. And this is not just a national problem within the U.S., which is where I'm based. It's an international problem, and so this is something that's going on globally. And I think we have to coax our bodies back into a state that is receptive to natural conception, and that requires proactivity rather than reactivity, based on what I've seen in my many years of clinical experience.
You're quite right. I was working in that field in the 80s as a young doctor, and at that time we assumed, and educated guess, that 50% of pregnancies that occur, so sperm or egg cell coming together, creating the first spark of life, will die. 50% of that. So, and that if you were to measure minuscule amounts of the hormones that we use to detect pregnancy, you would find that. So it is already a very precarious and strange battle of survival that is happening in the female womb at any one time. And you're quite right. In the last century, things have changed dramatically as far as our life is concerned. And we saw that certainly in Germany. And because I was working in fertility, and we were Germans being interested in environmental pollution, things like that. We found out, for example, that certain products that were used commonly in DIY wooden paneling that everyone in Germany in the 70s, 80s was doing, was causing abortions. And it was, so stuff like that. So what you're saying there, we could actually prove in studies. And it was weird because a young couple were fit and healthy. She got pregnant. They built their home. Dad does the homework, the DIY, beautiful, lovely paneling. And then he goes to work 5 days a week, whilst mommy stays at home and breathes all that shit in. So suddenly, after the first child, mommy starts not being able to have any more babies. And that is an example that we could prove. So you are so spot on in the effect of the environment. Um, and unfortunately, our lives, the stress and those things have taken a huge toll on many women. Uh, uh, Now, there is only so much you can do to alter lives. I mean, is that not a mad task? I mean, how do you go about preparing a man and a woman for pregnancy?
Absolutely. I think, regardless of the relationship construct, right, you have two individuals that are contributing to this pregnancy. And so, whatever that reproductive construct is, it's really important that both individuals are involved from the start.
Mm,
And I think there's a couple of big pillars of health, and your fertility is an extension of overall health. I think, one of the biggest misconceptions is that when we think about fertility, we think kind of below the waist, right? So we think it's, ovaries and uterus for females, and
uh,
kind of testes for male, but it's much more holistic than that. And your fertility is an extension of your health. And so rather than focusing myopically on just hormones, for example,
mm,
and your reproductive organs, there's your eggs and your sperm are cells just like any other cells in your body. And so the same things that nourish them, and the same things that are destructive to them are, the same thing as anything else. And so a lot of the things that you mentioned, right? We look at nutrition, we look at environmental toxins, we look at stress, as you
mm,
mentioned. And I think our job as a company, as Poplin, is to help kind of, instead of saying there's 500 things that you could be focusing on, kind of what are the five that you should be focusing on,
mm,
or for optimal impact, and then helping you break that down. And this is one of the reasons why we encourage folks to start this process, like you were saying in the beginning, a year in advance, just like you'd plan a wedding for a year, or plan for a career, or train for a
uh,
marathon, right? Any
yeah,
big undertaking
yeah.
in advance, right? The earlier you start, the more time you give yourself to proceed through these different steps, see how your body is responding, see how you're working through things with your partner, and to give your body time to adjust. And so that's generally what we recommend, is you start earlier and give yourself time, and then you can kind of work your way through these different things, because behavior change takes time. It takes time to eliminate toxins from your environment, right? It takes time to eliminate stressors, or change your relationship to the stressor if you can't eliminate it. And those are
Ooh,
all
nice,
pieces of the puzzle.
nice, nice. I like that. Change your relationship to the stressor. Excellent.
Hmm.
That does not allow a divorce in this setting. Okay, no, that's odd. No, I love it. The way you look at it in a holistic and a systematic approach, because sometimes we are so hit and miss, and we're a little bit like monkeys playing on a keyboard. Oh, that is nice. Ooh, let's try that. And uh, rather than going from a systematic approach. And I love the way that you look at various pillars. So, no doubt, nutrition will be part and parcel of that. What are you paying attention to when it comes to the nutrition?
Mm. So I think there are a couple of things. So as a nutritionist myself, nutrition is near and dear to me. I think there's a couple of things. So first thing is the quality versus quantity debate. And so if you think about it, back in the 1980s, right, we had this whole thing around like calories, calorie counting. That's kind of the thing. And I think it was fairly reductionistic in the sense that we said, okay, calories are the only thing that matters when it comes to managing weight, and therefore health. And I think certainly calories do matter, but it's one piece of an overall puzzle. And we learned, and we said, okay, well, actually, food composition and food quality are actually really important in this
Mm,
conversation. So calories do matter, but there's all these other things. And I think we're about to see a very similar shift in the fertility landscape, where we're saying, okay, not only does this concept of egg quantity is really important, but egg quality and sperm quality
mm,
is really important. And egg quality and sperm quality is an extension of, in many cases, your diet and your lifestyle.
mm,
And so the quality of foods literally make up the quality of the cell structure of your eggs and your sperm, right? So the fats that you have are going to make up the cell membranes and are going to dictate how open they are to cellular communication, how vibrant they are. So that's really important. Certain nutrients we know have been shown to improve egg quality and sperm quality, but also endometrial receptivity, for example. And so the food that you eat is, going to make up your cells. And then certainly we know that, kind of what the mother ate in the 2, 3, 4 months prior to pregnancy is actually what's going to make up the nutrient stores for the baby. Because it takes your body time to incorporate these nutrients into your body and then incorporate it into the baby. The baby's going to be pulling on your nutrient stores from, the last 3 months. And so what you did in the couple months prior really matters. So those are some of the things that, that I think of when I think about the critical role of nutrition when it comes to preparing for pregnancy.
And that is huge, because we certainly, if I jump forward now 12 months, the baby is out, and mum has now grown massively grown this beautiful structure in her tummy. Guess what? She is depleted to the nth degree. So postnatal depletion is only something that we've become to realize more and more now, how important it is to help mums get back on track after their pregnancy, and how much certain depletions then contribute to the development of postnatal depression and of other problems. But that's anyone's guess. We are not yet so good in the linking of these kind of things together. But you admit that if you have a garden and you don't put any fertilizer on it, but you grow the shit out of the garden, well, guess what? The next few crops won't be so great. So you accept that, you're logical. And yet when it comes to our bodies, we just completely neglect it. So nutrition, fantastic. But what do you want to do with the boys? Do the boys buy into that kind of concept? They're out there. I mean, typically we're talking 20s, 30s. There is still the testosterone and bulletproof. There is still me being out there working hard, drinking hard. But shall I take some vitamins? What shall I do? What do you recommend to men?
Yeah, I think we'll start at the end, and then I'll rewind. The message for the males is you should be doing almost the same things that your female partner is doing, and that is because all of the same things, the same principles apply around nutrition and stress and toxin management for males as they do for females. I think what's interesting is we can see it actually even more exquisitely in the male population, which is that the data suggests that we've sperm counts globally have dropped 60%, 60% in the last 40 years.
Wow. I
am shocked that this is not more headline news. People are not talking about this more. It is an astounding number. And sperm are developed roughly every 3 months. So, in females, females are born, at least the latest science suggests, with all of the eggs that they will ever have, and that, quantity diminishes over time. There is actually some evidence to suggest that there are these egg precursor cells. And so we're even questioning that, but we'll put that to the side for a second. We know, kind of that's the egg development cycle. And then the sperm development cycle is new every 3 months or so. However, that being said, sperm counts, meaning the generation of men that are existing today have lower fertility, lower sperm counts than their grandparents did by a very, very wide margin. And so you have to ask, what has changed? And it goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier. Have our genes changed in 60 years? No. I mean, epigenetics have changed. We can talk more about that. But it's the environmental impact on genes that is causing this. And then you have to ask the question: okay, what has changed meaningfully in the last 60 to 100 years to cause these reverberations in sperm count? And what is sperm a canary in the coal mine for? What is it telling us about? And it's much the same things that, that we've been talking about. And so the message to males is that, it's just as important for you to be in this this conversation and this preparation period, because you have a huge amount of leverage over your sperm development, because new sperm are being constantly developed, but like they're on a 3-month cycle. So you can improve them and improve them and improve them and really get, a good bang for your buck if you make the appropriate lifestyle changes. And the last thing I'll say on this is that, from an epigenetic perspective, the male's contribution is highest at the point of conception. And so if we think about, right, like the genetic material is what it's going to be, but the epigenetic material, which is kind of the environmental impact on genes, has a lifelong impact on the health of your baby. And that is transmitted through egg and sperm at the point of conception. And so the female partner, if we're talking about male-female construct again, that, the female partner is going to have epigenetic contributions through pregnancy, but the male partner, what he gives biologically is at that point of conception. And so if you want to optimize what you're contributing to your baby, it's what you're doing before conception that really matters.
Nicely said. Nicely said. And that is certainly something that is never spoken about. I have never heard someone saying it as logically and clearly as you. Admittedly, I am in my 50s. Going for pregnancy, that's no longer my thing, okay? Having said that, it makes so much sense what you're saying. And it makes so much sense. I love it that you have got this business hat on and that you look at measuring something, doing something about it, and remeasuring it. Assess, act, reassess. And that is actually a very beautiful and logical approach. Now, we do it in many other aspects of our life and realize that it is quite successful. Like, for example, in daily life, a man or a woman might jump onto the scales and says, oh, shit. Okay, so you measure, you do something about it, celery leaves and carrot sticks, and then you measure again a week later and you think, okay, I'm happy. So, well, that was logical. That is what you do. But then when it comes in a bigger scheme of things, I guess you need some help there. And that's, I guess, where Poplin comes in. And that's where a systematic approach will always be more successful than, oh, let's try that. Or let's try a few vitamins. I'm sure that makes me healthy. I can imagine that nutraceuticals and then should I say that those substances that are naturally low in our body or maybe low in our soil, selenium, zinc, those kind of things here in New Zealand are low. So we really need supplements to help that. Do supplements play a role in your overall approach?
They do. Before I dive into that, I actually want to go back to something you said, because I think it's so incredibly profound, about this idea of like testing and measuring. So, this is one of the things that I, thought was so interesting coming from the business world. Is if you think about it, we have KPIs in the business world, key performance indicators. And, that's, that would be sales, for example, if you're running a business, or if you're selling a book, like what is the, number of book sales? And you talked about another, KPI for health, which is weight. We can measure weight and we can see how it changes over time. And you get feedback based on the scale. Okay, am I moving and trending in the direction I want to or don't want to? And what's been challenging about fertility up until now is that it's been a black box. You kind of don't know what you're working with until you try, right? And what, the message that I want to get out to folks is, well, we actually can have KPIs for our fertility before we try. And that's what we're trying to do. Is there's a whole host of things that we know impact our ability to conceive. And, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but things like immune status and metabolic status, and we can get, proxies for those. And that can give us a really good sense of, are there any red flags or yellow flags that could interfere with your or your partner's ability to get pregnant, have a healthy pregnancy, or have a healthy baby. And that is, a beautiful way to look at this, because it gives you more information so that you know what you're working with before you're kind of rolling the dice to what you're saying and just trying it out and seeing. And so it gives people a bit more agency over the process, and then they kind of know where to intervene. And to tie it back to the question that you were asking about nutraceuticals and supplements. So first, as a nutritionist, like the number one ingredient of a fertility-friendly lifestyle is a fertility-friendly diet. And so that's, I think, incredibly important. You cannot out-supplement a poor diet. That being said, right?
Okay, I get it.
That being said, particularly for the female partner, but it's absolutely relevant for the male partner, as you were alluding to earlier, the pregnancy period is the most nutrient intensive period of a woman's entire life. And so, if you go into that period nutrient depleted, you absolutely, kind of will be depleted at the end, but it's not enough given, right, even your best efforts, right, given stress that can deplete the way we absorb nutrients, given the nutrient density, as you were mentioning, of our soil. It's not as robust as it used to be, given the fact that our stomach acid might not be adequate to break down foods. There's all sorts of things. There's all sorts of reasons why we, as a world and as individuals, are not digesting and assimilating nutrients as well as we possibly could. And so supplementation is particularly effective in those periods of time, as well as when you have increased nutrient needs, as in the time of pregnancy. And so what we can see on some of the, lab, there's nutrients that we know are supportive. And so that we can just look at testing, right? So things like vitamin D, for example, we know is a critical role. It, functions kind of like a vitamin, but also kind of like a hormone. And so, you can look at vitamin D levels and you may need to supplement that specifically, but we can look at a bunch of other nutrients, and then kind of what's going on in your unique body and what you might need more supportive nutrients for. And then there's other, sorts of supplements, gut support supplements, mitochondrial support supplements. There's a whole bunch of other things, right? Because our egg cells are most mitochondrially dense cells. And, so mitochondria are really important for cell division. And so that's just a kind of smattering of things that we can use supplementation for in this really critical developmental period.
That's right. And that is so important because that is the next step sort of in nutrition, to understand how the cells work on the inside and what exactly is actually required for a good function in that. That's something that in the past, certainly people did not pay as much attention to a generation or two generations ago. We might have just had the understanding of what is required. We had no idea how to measure it in some cases, or what to do about it. Today, CQ10 and other certain substances, we know we can supplement, and by give that, we can actually kickstart a metabolism, or at least assist metabolism to occur. So by actually being very focused and very targeted in those things that we take in, we can make a huge difference. And for those people out there who actually have done that, have gone onto this journey, many of my patients, or certainly myself, it is, once I paid attention to what I was doing, it was as if someone is switching on the lights. It was just bing, where's this clarity coming from? Ooh, I give my body what it needs. Funny that is. And it is literally, and it can be an aha moment like that. But you need guidance. You need a nutritionist to help you there. But you go beyond the nutrition. So we've discussed the nutrition, but you say, hang on, there are other aspects there. There's the environment there. There's the stress there. What does Poplin do about that?
So I think, well, let's look at stress next, because I think that's an important piece of this. So I think the science of stress, I think, is important. So there's a piece of this which is just educational, right? Which is just letting people know kind of the factors that can impact their fertility. Because I think the messaging to date has been like, well, just, you just should have gotten pregnant younger, right? Which is not helpful information. And, so there's a, we can get into this more, but there is a big difference between someone's biological age and their chronological age. And oftentimes they're not, they're confused. And so, just the quality of your life impacts the vitality of your cells, which is your biological age. And that can be vastly different than your chronological age, which is your age in years. And so a lot of the things that we're talking about can quote unquote reverse the clock from a cellular age perspective. Not quite on the, on the calendar though. So I think, there's a piece of this, which is just understanding what we can and can't control around the educational side. But I think stress is, something that's really misunderstood because, have you ever heard the advice if people are trying to conceive and someone says, oh, just relax. Like it's, just relax. Like not super helpful advice. And it's grounded in science, actually. And that's because if you think about it, our sex hormones and our stress hormones are in the same biochemical pathway. If we think about kind of how we've adapted, our body always prioritizes survival over procreation.
Sure.
And so when you're constantly stressed out, whether that's because you don't like your job or you don't like your commute or you're living in a moldy building, whatever it is, it could be a psychological stressor, it could be a physical stressor. Your body diverts resources from making your sex hormones to making your stress hormones. And so you literally don't have the raw materials necessary to make your hormones, let alone get pregnant. And so one of the things that's really important is contextualizing that for people. So just saying, okay, well, don't be stressed is not helpful. But saying, let's identify, right, sources of stress in your life. And we can actually, did you know, right? I'm sure you know, but maybe for many of your listeners, we can actually measure how stressed, quote unquote, your body is. We can look at your stress hormone, cortisol. And we can look at, is your body, even if you don't feel stressed, your body might actually be physiologically experiencing stress. And so if that's elevated over time, and I saw this time and time again with clients, right? Because, a lot of my marathon runners out there, right? That's a very cortisol producing activity. And so understanding that there are these things that we can look at that are stressors to the body that can interfere with making your sex hormones. Identifying those sorts of things, I think, can be an important part of the process, and then understanding that the science behind it.
Absolutely. No, and that is beautiful to actually shine a light on one's life and really see what is really happening. And you're quite right. It takes time. You can't just do that in a weekend. Oh, let's prepare for pregnancy. Okay, it doesn't work like that. No, there is a little bit more work to be done. And in all fairness, it sounds a little bit like a let's learn how to live school rather than a let's get ready for pregnancy school. It is really we are trapped in so many cul-de-sacs, in so many dead end streets where we're just working, and then suddenly things are starting to fall off our body, or the body of our car. If you compare us to that, the tires go flat, the lights go out, and everything is no longer working because we've just run ourselves into the ground on so multiple levels. And now you just want to completely out of that state create a pregnancy. Maybe it is not surprising that also over time we see an increased pathology, psychopathology and pathology in our youngsters. We see the generalized anxiety disorder and other anxiety disorders go through the roof. And of course, we blame social media. We blame the increased bombardment of our youngsters with that. But you could raise the question, do we actually not start already on the day of conception by putting our youngsters at a back foot due to the lifestyle that we have chosen prior to the pregnancy? If you have been playing hard, drinking drugs, we know this can have tremendous impact. It's called the fetal alcohol syndrome, where you basically cause clear damage to the child, and you are creating a child that predictably will have great difficulties in their life. And therefore, if you have suffered from from trauma that you have numbed with alcohol at the time when you get pregnant, then the circle will continue to the next generation. And it's very likely that things will not change. But the good news is the past does not equal the future. By actually being prepared towards your pregnancy and saying, actually, I want to become pregnant. And now let's seek help with my addiction. Why am I actually drinking? Why am I actually taking drugs? Why do I behave the way I do? Maybe by that, you're already beginning the journey that essentially Poplin and Alexandria here is actually advocating. A good hard look at your life, how you're living it, how is the stress contributing to your drinking, what's your nutrition like because of the drinking, or that is there an eating disorder that further has aggravated your metabolic malfunctions, so to speak, by actually looking at that and working with people to actually help you through that, and therefore change the way you've been abusing your body, and now adding that positive, hey, I actually want a baby, and I will now prepare for that just as much as I want to prepare for some other big event in my life. Is that not a beautiful, beautiful way of readjusting, of rethinking, of having a new incentive, maybe to change your lifestyle? A little baby. That's nice. I like actually that, and I love that Poplin and you, Alexandria, have put sort of a framework around that. How that school of life can be targeted towards a successful pregnancy and towards giving that new generation the best possible start. And how cool is that? That puts a smile on my face, I must say.
Puts a smile on my face. I mean, you said it's such a poetic way that you said that. I think, one of the observations I had, and kind of what fills my heart when I think about this work is, what I think when we are sick, we focus inward on getting better, on getting well. When we are well, we focus outward on sharing our gifts with the world. And so I think there is something about, trying to ensure that future generations are well so that they can share their gifts with the world. But as you said, right, that starts with the parents being able to heal themselves. And this is not about perfectionism either, right? We're all humans, in a human experience, doing the best we can on an hourly, sometimes second to second basis. And what a beautiful, I find that getting pregnant is such a reflective time, if you allow it to be, for thinking about kind of, who am I, and who do I want to be in this next chapter of life? And, am I the role model that I want to be for a future child? And if your answer to that question is no judgment, but it is your opportunity to potentially change the answer to that question. And right, kids are very perceptive. You can't tell them, pick up your clothes, if you don't pick up your clothes. You can't tell them, eat well, if you're not eating well, right? They will sense that disingenuousness. And so I think this is a really beautiful time to do many of the things that you're talking about, an inventory of your life, and to say, kind of, how am I doing, and is it up to par to my standards, and to what I'd want for my future family, my future children, and am I giving myself and my future family the best shot possible at contributing, whatever it is, whether they're musicians or artists or entrepreneurs or podcast hosts, whatever it is that they're doing, doctors, that they do it the best that they possibly can.
Exactly. Oh, it's beautiful. It makes so much sense to me what you're saying there, Alexandria. And it is, but if other people are now saying, wow, she's really onto something, where can people find you?
Oh, well, thank you for asking that. They can find us on our website. It's Get Poplin, GETPOPLIN.com. And on social media, it's also at Get Poplin. And we're just so excited to support folks as they start to explore
Mm,
planning to get pregnant, and along their journeys.
brilliant. Where does the name come from? Poplin.
It's a synonym for basically interweaving. And so there's so many different components, like we've talked about, right? There's stress, there's
Uh,
nutrition, and then there's the female contribution, the male contribution. There's, kind of all of these different pieces that go into preparing for conception, and for a healthy pregnancy, not just kind of what we've been taught, which is hormones or, kind of this myopic view. So we wanted something that involved both partners, all the different pillars of health,
mm.
and kind of in a much more integrative way.
Cool. Cool. Get Poplin. And guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video of the podcast. You've got all the links down there. Whilst you're down there, you might as well press the subscribe and the like button so that you know about new releases that are coming out. Alexandria, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for discussing with me this beautiful part of creating life and uh, basically coming into a new era of within your life cycle, this kind of planning for fertility. There's so much we can do, and you have shown some light on that, and for that I'm ever so grateful.
Well, I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for letting me share.
Fantastic. Alexandria, look after yourself. And you guys out there, come on, there's a life to live. Live it with passion and look after yourself in the truest meaning of the word. Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.